your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2019 NFL projections for the upcoming season. We're talking AFC West, and this is a division that last year was ultra competitive. Two 12-4 teams vying for the number one spot in the AFC. Ultimately, the Chiefs would win out via tiebreakers. They would be your number one seed. And unjustly, the Chargers then was relegated to the number 5 seed in the AFC. When you win 12 games, there's no way you shouldn't be playing a home playoff game, but that's another discussion for another day. That's how good this division was a season ago. It was top heavy. The two bottom feeders in the division in Denver and Oakland, not so much. But when you're going to win 12 games, you're going to have to beat up on the lesser teams in your division, and both of those teams did that last year. I think it's going to be vastly different, however, in 2019, as the Raiders are improved and the Broncos are very much improved as well. And I think one of these teams in this division, I'm not saying any names, is going to take a massive step backwards in 2019. And we're going to find out if the Chiefs are who they say they are. Last year, they burst onto the scene. Well, let's not act as if Alex Smith didn't have this team playing good football, but Patrick Mahomes took them to another level. You actually felt like the Chiefs were a serious Super Bowl contender. You never really felt that way with Alex Smith at quarterback. Now we're going to find out if they're legit or not in 2019. Is there an encore in store for the Chiefs, or was last year a flash in the pan? Got rid of their defensive coordinator, and they needed to. And in the AFC Championship game was just the tip of the iceberg. He had been bad for a long time. They finally moved on from Bob Sutton. They bring in a guy that has won in this league as a coordinator, not as a head coach, but as a coordinator, in Steve Spagnuolo. We'll see what the Chiefs do this year. Obviously, the Raiders with John Gruden, now with Mike Mayock as his general manager. Big draft that they just had in 2019. Turned this roster over in free agency as well. They're a different squad. Joe Flacco's arrival in Denver gives them a shot in the Mile High City. And the Chargers, they've got a lot going on in Los Angeles with that Chargers football team. We'll get to all of these teams in this division. As you can see, the standings from last year, 12-4, 12-4. And the Denver Broncos were 6-10, and the Oakland Raiders were a 4-win team. So this is a vastly different division. Let's jump into the AFC West and what I think, your man Louie T, thinks is going to happen in this division in 2019. We start with the team that won this division last year and essentially was a quarter away from making a trip to the Super Bowl in the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's take a look at their 2019 schedule and what I think is going to take place. So we start in week 1, and this is the team they played last year at the crib. Last year, Jacksonville was a little bit disoriented, a little bit fractured. Offense wasn't carrying their weight. The defense wasn't as good. I think they're going to return to their 2017 form. And I think you're going to see that in week 1. I know this sounds crazy, but I actually believe the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to take care of the Chiefs at home in week 1. I'm taking the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Chiefs in week 1, believe it or not. And I actually, that's, again, more indicative of what I think about the Jaguars and less of what I think about the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to be really good. I just think the Jaguars are going to be actually really good in 2019 as well. You go to the next game, and this is where you start to realize, okay, the Chiefs are for real. They're legit. At Oakland, if you're going to win double-digit games and want to win this division, unfortunately, the Raiders are still the Raiders. They haven't shown that they are back to their 2016 form yet. So you got to take care of the Raiders. Home, away, it really doesn't matter. You need to find a way to win that game, and that's exactly what I expect the Chiefs to do here as they take care of the Raiders in week 2. Then you get a toughie at the crib, home opener for the Chiefs, so I expect the crowd to be ginned up. And we know Arrowhead, one of the, if not the toughest place to play in the National Football League. Seattle will have something to say about that. The Dome in New Orleans has a lot to say about that as well. But for my money, Kansas City, still one of the toughest places to play. I think it's the toughest place to play in the AFC conference, and I don't know if it's even close. And so that crowd is going to be ridiculous. Baltimore coming in there. They played them tough last year, but I just don't see the Chiefs losing that home opener as they take care of business against the Baltimore Ravens, who I actually think is going to be a really good team in 2019 as well. At Detroit, I don't think very much of the Lions, so I think they're going to take care of business there. And so just like that, after losing the first game of the season, they've run off 3 straight and showing you why they are considered one of the better teams in the AFC conference. And the party doesn't stop. You go to Sunday Night Football at the crib versus Indianapolis, a team that you bounced in the playoffs in the divisional round. I think you're going to beat them up yet again in this ball game. Take care of Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts on primetime television. The following week, you're home for the Houston Texans, a team that I think can be improved, but I still don't believe in that offensive line, and thus I think you're going to take advantage of them on that side of the football, not to mention your offense is pretty damn good. I think you're going to take care of the Texans in that football game. Then you get to week 7, and if you ask me last year, outside of New England, obviously, the team that played you the best was the Denver Broncos. And so if there's one team in your division that I think, and yes, the Chargers did beat you. So, a lot of people say, what are you talking about? The Chargers actually beat these guys. Well, they stomped the Chargers in Los Angeles in week 1 last year. And then the Chargers needed a come from behind effort to beat them in Arrowhead. I'm not saying, all right, they still won the game. And so you got to give them credit for that. But both games, you could argue the Denver Broncos could have and probably should have beat the Chiefs last year. I think they're going to actually get it done this year, and I think it's going to happen at home in week number 7. I think the Broncos on a Thursday night on primetime television take care. Remember, they had a similar spot Monday night last year. I think it was week 2, maybe week 3, in Mile High, had the Chiefs on the ropes, let them off the hook. That's not going to happen this time. They're going to take care of the Chiefs on a Thursday night this time around and get the job done. But the Chiefs do bounce back the following week. They're on primetime again when you're the Chiefs, when you have the guy that graced the cover of the Madden cover with Patrick Mahomes. You're going to be on primetime television as many times as they can force feed you onto the screen. And so the very next week, you're going to get Rodgers versus Mahomes. It should be an epic contest, similar to what we got with Brady and Mahomes last year in the regular season game on Sunday night. They're hoping for those types of fireworks. Either way, doesn't really matter. I still anticipate that the winner of that game is going to be the team at home, that team being the Kansas City Chiefs. The next week, they've got the Minnesota Vikings at the crib. Vikings, I think, are going to be a better team, but not good enough to come into Arrowhead. Had this game been in Minnesota, there may have been something to consider here, but this game's in Arrowhead. I just don't see the Vikings strolling into Arrowhead and coming out of there with a victory. You look at week 10 on the road at Tennessee. This is an interesting game here because I really don't know what to make of the Titans right now. The Titans are one of those teams. Any given week, they can beat you. And I know you can say that about any team in the league, but the Titans are one of those teams. They're Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. When they've got it going, when Derrick Henry's running the football, when they're playing sound defense, they're a scary team to deal with. They can dismantle you. But then you get the games where Marcus Mariota's a little off, the defense is sleepwalking, and you can take care of the Titans. And so I'm not sure what Titans team is going to show up, but I do have confidence in the Chiefs' ability to go on the road and win. And so I'm taking the Chiefs there. Then you end up at the Chargers. This one is in Mexico City on a Monday night. Remember, last year, a game was supposed to be played in that same spot in Mexico City, and it didn't happen because their turf wasn't in great shape. We don't know if they're going to play in Mexico City or not. Let's just assume the game is in Mexico City where it belongs. That advantage would go to then the Chargers. But again, the Chargers really don't have a home field advantage in Mexico, in Los Angeles. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I still think that the Chiefs are the superior team in that matchup and therefore going to get the victory. And then you go to your bye week in week 12, and it's a well-timed bye for the now 10-2 Kansas City Chiefs, playing extremely good football, or 9-2, excuse me, as you go into the 12th week. And so you're playing extremely good football, especially after dropping the first one. You've managed to win 9 out of the next 10 games. So you get off the bye, and you're staring the Oakland Raiders in the face at the crib. And that's one, frankly, you got to get. If you're at home, you're playing the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to be better, but not good enough to come into Arrowhead, as I said, and beat you. But then the following week, another epic showdown between Brady and Mahomes. Again, it's in Foxborough like it was last year on an epic Sunday night showdown. And I assume that this is going to be another massive matchup between two powerhouses in the AFC. But again, the advantage goes to the Patriots as they're at home in that matchup. And so I see Brady and company taking care of business late in the season. You know how it gets cold in Massachusetts, up in Foxborough, Patriot weather. They just take care of business late in the season. I think they're going to do it there. Then you get Denver back at the crib. They took care of you earlier in the season in Denver. You're going to avenge that loss here with a win over the Broncos to split that season series. Then the next week, this is a big one too. At Chicago on a Sunday night, we saw the Bears dismantle an elite NFL offense in that same exact spot last year when they took apart Jared Goff in that Rams high-octane offense. I don't know if they're necessarily going to do that to these Chiefs, but they are going to slow them enough down to be able to get the victory. I've got the Chiefs losing that ball game. And then they wrap up the season at the crib versus the Chargers in a game that I expect them to win. And that puts the Chiefs squarely at 12-4, 5-1 in the division. Outstanding mark, similar to exactly what they did last year. As a matter of fact, except instead of losing to the Chargers as their lone loss in the division this year, it's going to be to the Denver Broncos. And yes, of course, 12-4 and winning the division qualifies them for the postseason. So now we take it to the next team in the division, the team that tied them last year in the division in terms of mark at 12-4 in the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a team dealing with a little bit of controversy with the Melvin Gordon III situation. Didn't really love Phillip Rivers. I talked about this on the podcast. Didn't really love him coming out in support of the running backs on the roster. Again, you can like and love your running backs that you have, but you don't need to say that at the expense of Melvin Gordon trying to get paid. I didn't really love that comment necessarily, and I don't like where they are necessarily going into the season. And I think they're going to miss Tyrell Williams a little bit more than people think. I think this is a team that they got some lucky bounces to go their way. This is a team last year that, if you recall, had the come from behind win against the Steelers, should have lost that football game. Had the come from behind win against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, should have lost that football game. Could have easily lost a number of other games. The San Francisco game comes to mind. Could have easily have lost that football game. Could have easily have lost the game. That was a big win, though, against the Seahawks over in Seattle. That's when I knew they were for real. But they could have lost that football game very easily. Easily could have lost to the Cincinnati Bengals, which was a shock. And then they did lose to the Denver Broncos late in the season, which is family business, and I understand that. But I thought they should have lost to the Titans over in London. If you remember that game, I don't think they should have went for two should the Titans have. They had all the momentum in that game. The Chargers simply had two big plays for touchdowns in that game and really nothing else offensively to show, where the Titans you could see the momentum building. They dominated the second half of that game. Titans should have won that game. So easily they could have lost 3 games last year, and instead of 12-4, it could have easily been 9-7, 8-8 potentially. If they don't get those same breaks in 2019, I don't know if the Chargers are the same team. So I'm kind of foreshadowing what I think the Chargers are going to be in 2019. Let's go through the schedule and see how it all unfolds. So we start in week number 1 with this Chargers football team, and they've got the Indianapolis Colts at the crib. I think they can get that game at home versus Indy. Andrew Luck going to miss most of the preseason. Not that it really matters, but you'd like to see him get some reps. I don't know if he's necessarily going to do that. I think the Chargers are going to be able to get that one to start off their season. And then this is why the Chargers aren't going to be the team they were last year, because of games like week 2. On the road at Detroit, that's a game you should win. I don't think the Lions are going to be all that great in 2019. It's a sleepy type of game. Detroit can be a sleepy place to play. And I think they're going to go into Detroit. And this is a game last year that they won against teams that were lesser than them. I think this is a game that they actually lose in week number 2 to the Chargers. And unfortunately, to the Lions. And unfortunately, those are the kinds of games that cost you a chance to make the postseason when you look back at your season. But they bounce back after that at home versus Houston. I think they win that football game. Same could be said for at Miami. They've struggled with Miami in the past on the road, but this is a different Miami team. I think one that they can get. But it wouldn't shock me if they went to Miami and lost that game as well. But I think they're going to win that football game. Then you come home for Denver, and I actually think that the Denver Broncos are going to get you in that ball game at the crib. I think the Broncos, they got you last year at L.A. And so I think they can do it again, and I think they will do it in that football game. And so I got you losing that game. Then the next week, you got the Steelers at the crib on a Sunday night. It's pretty much the rematch of last year's game. out in Pittsburgh, where you were able to mount a ridiculous comeback in the fourth quarter and steal that one from the Steelers and really stun them at home. I think you're going to lose this game this time. They're looking for revenge. They're out for revenge, and I think they're going to get it by coming to your house and beating you on Sunday night. The next week, you're at Tennessee. Again, very, very winnable football game. Wouldn't shock me if you went in there and won, but I think Tennessee protects home in this football game, and I don't think you get it. And just like that, after starting the season off 3-1, you've lost 3 straight games, and now you're 3-4. So that's going to be the type of season I think it's going to be for the Chargers in 2019. At Chicago, though, and this is why the Chargers are one of those teams that you just don't get. You lose at Detroit, but then you beat Chicago in Chicago, which is what I think happens. And I know they're fully capable of winning both of those games. But the Chicago one would be more of a surprise. I think the Chargers are going to be a solid team. I think the Bears are actually going to be a really good team. And you're going to see the Chargers rise up. And sometimes they have the capability to rise up to play against teams that are maybe a little bit better than them and beat them. And then they have also, in that same breath, the ability to play down to the level of competition, as you saw in week 2 to the Detroit Lions. Nonetheless, they get the win versus the Bears. The next week, though, they're at home versus Green Bay, and they don't get that game. And again, it's those types of situations, because I don't really know what to make of Green Bay in this upcoming season, but I think the Green Bay Packers are going to be good enough to go to L.A. and win. The following week, you're at Oakland on a Thursday night. That seems like a spot that's prime for an Oakland Raiders win. Thus, I got you losing that ball game as well. Then you're at your home in Mexico City on a Monday night versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I already told you you're going to lose that football game. So, again, a lot of losses piling up here for this Chargers team. But in typical Los Angeles Chargers fashion, they die hard. You're not going to see them ever fold the tent with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. They're one of those teams that you never count them out. They could be 5 games under 500 with 7 to go, and somehow, miraculously, we're going to be talking about the Chargers making a push for the postseason, despite being that far down and under 500. And here come the damn Chargers. They get a bye week. It's a well-timed bye, as you can see. Losers of 6 out of 7. They need this one in the worst way, so they get a chance to lick their wounds. They come off the bye, and here come the Chargers getting on their horse. So they get the Denver Broncos on the road, and they avenge that loss earlier in the season to the Broncos, and this starts a nice little win streak here as they take care of the Jaguars in Jacksonville. And I think the Jaguars are going to be a good football team. So again, you see the Chargers raising their play to meet the level of competition in that particular ball game, taking care of Jacksonville. Then you're home on a Sunday night against the Minnesota Vikings, a very, very winnable game, and it's one that I actually have you winning. And so just like that, you've run off 3 straight. You've gotten yourself back into playoff contention. It might be too little too late, but you're making a run at it, and that's what the Chargers do. They never quit. And you get another one against the Raiders here to avenge an earlier loss in the season. And just like that, 4 straight wins for the Chargers. You win this next game, and you're at 9-7. And right there, you could be talking about a potential playoff spot. But as you already know, talked about the Chargers or the Chiefs already, they're winning that game in Week 17. And so, thus, you finish up the season at 8-8. And it's unfortunate that, you take a step back. Phillip Rivers, at this point of his career, you want to see him get something meaningful done. You want to see him play in an AFC championship game with a chance to make it to the Super Bowl. 8-8, not going to get it done. 3-3 in the division, not going to get it done. And, of course, not good enough for playoff contention. So this is a team that I feel like is going to take a step back in 2019. I like the Chargers football team. I like their defense especially. I'm not in love with their offense. Chargers fans know, and they're going to kill me for this. They always do. But I'm not an Austin Eckler fan. I actually like their backup running back, Justin Jackson. But, again, he's not Melvin Gordon the third. And I don't know if they're going to figure it out. I think the Chargers are a stubborn enough organization that they're going to say, hey, this is our hardline stance. Take it or leave it. And Melvin Gordon, I think he's principled enough to say, nah, that's not enough. I'm good. I'm willing to sit out if I have to. I think cooler heads are going to prevail. This isn't a franchise tag we're talking about that's not signed. He's under contract. I expect something to get done and him be there, but you just never know. It's a distraction right now for a team that doesn't need any distractions. It's a distraction for sure. So 8-8 for the Chargers. as we move on to the next team in the division. You've been listening to me on my podcast, and you know I actually think this team has a chance to be really good in 2019. I love Vic Fangio wherever he goes. Great defense generally follows. This defense was already tailor-made to have a step back in the right direction if the right man took over. I can't think of a better guy to come in and take over this defense than Vic Fangio. And then, you know, I'm a huge Joe Flacco guy. You know I'm a Joe Cool guy. So I'm a Joe Flacco apologist. I'm not afraid to admit that. I think he's in a great spot here with the Broncos. They're going to run it. They got some targets to throw it to, and E-Man San and Sutton and Noah Fant. And it's a bunch of guys that they really like. They got the kid from Penn State, Deshaun Hamilton. There's a lot of stuff out there for Joe to get the football to. I love this spot, and I think this is a team that actually has a chance to make it happen in 2019. I don't know if it will happen, but I think they're going to be in the mix. That is for certain. Let's start off with week 1 at Oakland on a Monday night. This is a game that I think the new coordination of the Raiders, they're going to be ginned up. Remember last year they had the same spot in that 10 o'clock doubleheader Monday night slot, and they weren't able to get it done. They just weren't good enough. The Rams were a good football team. We didn't know how good the Rams were going to be, but obviously the Rams ended up being one of the elite teams in the league. They just weren't good enough, and I think they're going to be good enough in week 1, home, ginned up. Last year, potentially in Oakland. I think they get it done in week 1 do the Raiders, so I think the Broncos lose that football game. But then I think they bounce back the next week, and this Bears team, again, I think they're going to be really good. But Vic Fangio against his old mates, who knows that Bears offense better than Vic Fangio? Nobody does, okay? He intimately knows what they're good at, strengths, weaknesses, how to attack them. I think he takes advantage of that, and I think their defense is good enough to get after Mitchell Trubisky, and I think their offense is good enough to just do enough to win that game. I got them taking care of business in week 2 in their home opener. The following week, versus Green Bay on the road. Don't think they're good enough to go into Lambeau and win that particular game. And so that's a loss there. The following week after that, they're at home for Jacksonville. I just think the Jaguars are going to be really good. I think they can get to Joe Flacco, force him to turn it over, and therefore I have them losing that football game as well. So not a great start for the Denver Broncos. The inverse of what the Chargers did to start off their season at 1-3. But after that, they get on a little bit of a run here at the Chargers. They need this game to pretty much salvage their season. You drop to 1-4 and things get a little bit dicey in Denver, but you win that game on the road nonetheless to kind of save face at that point of the season. The next game, you're home for Tennessee. That's a winnable game and one that I think you get. I think you get after Mariota. You force him into some mistakes. Then defensively, you win that game. And same could be said for the game after that against the Kansas City Chiefs on a Thursday night, as I talked about already. Really see you getting after Mahomes. You were one of the few teams that harassed Mahomes and made it tough and difficult on him. And I think this time you actually come out victorious. And so you get that win there. The following week, though, you're at Indy. I just don't like this spot for you. Andrew Luck has had some success against the Denver Broncos, even dating back to when Peyton was there. He would struggle with them, but he finally got over that mountain of beating the Denver Broncos. And remember, he even had that playoff win versus the Denver Broncos a couple years ago. So I think he feels comfortable taking down Denver, and I think he's going to do that there. So then after that, you're home for Cleveland. And I told you I'm not on the Cleveland train like everyone else is, and I got you taking care of the Browns in week number 9. You get a week 10 bye. That is a perfectly placed bye on your schedule. Unfortunately for you, though, you come off that bye and you're on the road 2 straight weeks in some tough environments. And Minnesota is one of the toughest. I just don't see you going to Minnesota and winning against that defense. That's one of those types of defenses that can get to Flacco and force him into a mistake or two. So I see you losing that game. But then you go to Buffalo. That's not a tough, easy place to play either. That's really tough. Really don't know what to make of Buffalo. I think I've talked about them already. I already gave them a record for the season. I don't think they're going to be all that great, but I don't think they're going to be terrible either. Wouldn't shock me if you went into Orchard Park and lost this football game, but I think you have what it takes to get to Josh Allen. He won't be scrambling around and running against this athletically gifted defense. I see you taking care of the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, and that leads you to week 13 at the Chargers, or home, for the Chargers. You've already beaten them once, but unfortunately, you're not going to get them twice as they take care of business there. But you get Houston at Houston. I'm down on the Texans a little bit. I do not love their offensive line. I don't love the picks that they made along the offensive line. And maybe eventually those picks will turn out to be right. But early on, I think those guys are going to struggle. And hence, defense that features Bradley Chubb and Von Miller and company, I think they're going to feast on Deshaun Watson. And you're going to get the win there. Then you follow that up at Kansas City. I already talked about that. Don't think that's a great spot for you there. Don't see you getting the win there. And hence, I've got you losing to the Chiefs in that ball game as the Chiefs take care of business. Then you finish up the season at home twice in a row against two teams that I think are going to struggle in 2019. Hence, I think you finish up the season with 2 consecutive wins to put you at a finish of 9-7, which gets you second place in this division. And I'm going to tell you what, ball bounces your way in one or two of these other games that you lost, and you could potentially be talking about a 10-6, a Denver Broncos team that's making a trip to the postseason in the first year of Vic Fangio as head coach. I think this defense is going to keep you in ball games. I think Joe Flacco, he's going to make his fair share of mistakes, as Joe often does. But when you give Joe chances late in ball games, which is something you couldn't do last year with Case Keenum, you were in ball games and Case Keenum just came up short for you last season. You get in some games down the stretch where you need a field goal to win, or you need a touchdown and you're down 5 or you're down 4, and you give Joe the football with 1:22 left and one timeout, and he's got to go 63 yards and for a touchdown. You can go ahead and book it now. Joe's going to take you down the field, ice water in his veins, and get you in the end zone, and you're going to win the football game. So I think you're going to have a shot legitimately of making a postseason in 2019. But I got you on the outside looking in at 9-7 as we sit here right now in early August. So let's wrap up this division and talk about the Oakland Raiders. And this is a team that I think is vastly improved. They still haven't seen Antonio Brown on the field. You've seen his feet, though. They look horrific. Don't really know what he's going to bring to the table. If he's healthy, we know what this guy can do, but we don't know if he's going to be healthy. They're a young team. They're still trying to mesh and gel together. So there's going to be growing pains, as you can expect, but I think they're going to be in a ton of ball games, and it would not shock me if I'm way off and this team is closer to 8-8 than they are the record that I'm going to have them ending up with. Nonetheless, let's jump into this Raiders schedule and quickly dissect what the Raiders could be in 2019. So we start week 1. I already talked about that. I think they're going to win on Monday night versus the Denver Broncos. Week 2, though, and this gets ugly quick for the Raiders. Like you know what the sad part about this Raiders team in 2019 is? If this were the schedule from last year, this Raiders team would have a legitimate shot to win 10 games, because that schedule last year turned out to be really soft and they had some opportunities to win some ball games. This schedule is absolutely brutal for the Raiders. They had no shot. I mean, literally, they were a dead team walking, looking at this schedule. And you're going to see as we get through it, like, God damn, there's no breaks for them early to get off to a start. Last year, I felt like the schedule was tailor-made for the Raiders to get off to a good start, and they just weren't good enough to capitalize. This year, no chance in hell they get off to a good start, as you will see. So you're home for the Chiefs. Hey, if you're serious and you want to have a good season, go beat the Chiefs. Go have yourself a season. I don't see it happening. I already told you that. So obviously, I've got them losing in week 2 to the Chiefs. Then you're on the road against 2 playoff teams, 2 playoff caliber teams. Let me say that the Vikings did not make the postseason last year, but I think they have a legitimate shot at making it this year. You're not going to Minnesota and winning. You're not. You're not going to Indy and winning the following week either. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in. And then you finally get another home game, and guess who's coming to town? Guess who's coming to dinner? It's the Mac Attack. He's back in the silver and black hole, and he's coming for some asshole. Pause. He's coming to tear some ass up. Is Khalil Mack in this football game, and it could get ugly in week 5. That's another loss. And look at the defenses that you've had to face. Denver, you're going to win that football game. Minnesota, and now the Bears. Not to mention a road game sandwiched in there with the Indianapolis Colts. That's tough, man. After winning the first game of the season, 4 straight losses. And now you hit your bye week. You probably need it at this point after 4 straight losses. But it doesn't get any easier off the bye. You got at Green Bay off the bye. Good job, schedule makers. Nice favor there. Off the bye at Lambeau against the bad man. And then after that, you get Deshaun Watson scrambling around against your defense. That's not a good look for you. That's another loss. And then finally, you get a team that you can beat that's coming to the crib in Detroit. And so finally, the 6-game skid after starting the season off with a win is finally snapped with a win versus the Detroit Lions. Whew! As a matter of fact, that win felt so good that you decided to do it again the next week versus the Chargers. And that win on a Thursday night was so good, you said, well, damn, let me bless myself with another win. And you needed it because 3 straight home games for the Raiders. 3 straight home games. You needed that relief. You took full advantage. And look at that. 3 straight wins. Now going to New York against that defense, not going to be an easy feat. As a matter of fact, don't see you getting it done in that football game as the Jets take you down in that ball game. And so, unfortunately for you, no win there. I already talked about the Chiefs getting you and sweeping you in 2019, so they get you there. So now all of a sudden, you look at this Titans game at the crib, and I don't know what the Titans are going to be at that point of the season. I surmise they're going to be fighting for their playoff lives by that point of the season. They always are. Everyone in that division usually is right around that point. Everyone's going to be somewhere in that 7-5, 8-4, 6-6 mode. Titans are going to be right there fighting for their playoff lives. And you don't give a damn. You're going to take them down in week number 14. So then you look at week 15, and that's Jacksonville. Even though it's at the crib, that defense getting after Derek Carr's ass, it just isn't going to be pretty. And so I don't like you in that spot. And so I've got the Jaguars coming into Oakland and winning. And it's not going to get much prettier. The final 2 games are both on the road in the division against 2 teams that are frankly just better than you at this point. And so the Chargers get you there, and the Broncos finish up the season, and they get you as well. And so, I got you going 5-11, 2-4 in the division, which is an improvement from your 1-5 mark in the division last year. No consolation prize. You're going to be in ball games. Don't scoff at that 5-11. That's a 5-11 trending upward. I know you don't want to hear that, but that's the way I see it. Obviously, 5-11, not good enough for playoff contention, but that's a team that's going to grow a ton. It's very young. You're going to grow a ton in 2019, and I think you're going to be ready to compete in 2020. So when you look at this division overall, as you can see, the standings that I have, my projections for this division over top, scrolling across. This is a division that features 9 primetime games, so they're going to be on TV quite a bit. Again, 5 of them involve the Kansas City Chiefs, but this is a division that got a little bit of love when it came to some primetime action, and so I'm looking forward to this division. I could be wrong about the Chargers. I don't think I'm wrong about the Chargers. I really feel good about the Broncos. I could be right about the Broncos. I could be wrong about the Broncos. Hell, I could be wrong about the Raiders. The one team I feel really confident about is the Chiefs. Hell, I could be wrong about the Chiefs. They could take a step back. I think the team that takes a step back in this division, however, is the Chargers. We'll see. I know you guys are going to let me have it, or at least tell me how you feel about this division. I'm looking forward to it. And so, with that being said, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. If you're not going to join me for the live feed and tell me how you feel about this division, at least leave it in the comment section. Tell me what you think is going to transpire in the AFC West in 2019. I'm your man, Louie T. See you next time. You guys have a good one.
Louie T Network.